We're going to keep the program moving, and we talked a little bit. I think a couple of our speakers have certainly mentioned the fact that the OSD amendment did not pass. That does not negate the fact that we still have some low-performing schools, which means that we have some struggling children and students in those schools. But it's not as if we've been sitting back, or the Department of Education and many other organizations have not been sitting back twiddling their thumbs. They have certainly been working hard at turning those schools around. We have with us today two representatives from the Department of Education to talk with us a bit about what they are doing to help those struggling schools, Avis King and Dr. Will Rombaugh, and I'm going to let them take the podium.
Well, good morning, everyone. Almost good afternoon. First of all, I want to thank Georgia Partnership for having us today. We are glad to be talking about the work that's going on in school improvement. I'm the Deputy Superintendent for School Improvement, and especially about the work that's going on in school and district effectiveness, and Will is the Director for School and District Effectiveness. Working with our most academically challenged schools, our most at-risk schools, I want to start out by saying this from the very beginning. We do not designate schools to be on the list. We're not the people that do that. What we do is we support and we serve our schools. And we work really, really hard to build those relationships with those districts and those schools so that we can do that effectively. That's very, very important to us. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the current work that's going on. I'm going to give you some high-level statistics. I think Will's going to give you some statistics and results kind of hot off the press. We've just kind of put pencil to paper really quickly. And then Will is going to take you into what we are moving toward, where we're headed. Because we've had some success, but we know we can do better. We want to do better. And so we're moving toward that, and we've got some things that we want to share with you today. Okay, we knew you'd have a couple of basic questions. OSD did not pass. So, what are we currently doing to help schools? And what more can be done? Now, I'm going to go through this and I'm going to make it as clear as I can. We have to continually work on making it clear to one another because there's several different designations. I'm going to start with a little bit of background about the different designations about the schools on the list. I'm going to talk about federally designated schools first, and those are your priority and your focus schools that are identified in the current 2015 ESEA waiver. And y'all remember No Child Left Behind. 2002, we asked for a waiver from No Child Left Behind, and we received it, and we had schools on the list. 2015, we asked for another waiver, and so we had a group of schools on the list for 2015, and now, of course, we're working on a new waiver. We're in the process of doing that. Now, if you look at this first group of schools, Priority SIG Focus, these are federally designated schools, okay? Your priority schools are your lowest 5% of title schools, and that's based on the academic portion of the CCRPI, that's College and Career Ready Index. So that's how those schools get on the list. This part right here is they're your SIG schools. Now, that is a subsection of priority. Your SIG schools are all priority schools, okay? But they get to apply for a competitive federal grant. And if they're approved, they receive federal funds and they put in a multi-year reform model. But they are a subsection of priority. I want to make that clear. And focus schools are Title I schools too, but they're on the list because of achievement gap. So those are your federally designated schools. So let's come down here to opportunity. It has an asterisk because these schools would have been eligible if OSD had passed. And the reason I have them here is because there are some schools that were opportunity that were priority. There were some schools that were opportunity that were focus, okay? And there were some schools that were opportunity only that didn't fit into either category. And at the department, we were very proactive. A couple of years ago, our superintendent, our executive cabinet, we all talked about this. We said, we've got to provide support for these schools. Even though they're not in the federal category, what can we do to help these schools? And so there's a group of opportunity-only schools that we have been providing some service for. And I'll tell you about those. Okay, any questions on that? So, these are the number of schools that we've served this year. We've had 79 priority, And the subset of SIG 14, which are also priority, we've had 14 SIG schools that have been working through their multi-year reform model, and we're putting in 5 more this month. We've got 163 focus schools, and I need to tell you a little bit about those. We provide the funding, it's federal funding, and it goes to our RESAs. And our RESAs are our regional education service agencies. We have 16 of those positioned throughout the state, and they serve the focus schools. So we provide the funding, and they provide the school improvement specialist, and they take care of that work. And we have 108 districts that this all flows from. Now, when you get down to the opportunity schools, the 57, what we did for them is we provided them $10,000 so that they could attend all the professional learning that we did. Now, they're also available to listen to any of our webinars, look at any of our resources, come to anything we did. We wanted them to have the same professional development that our priority schools had and that our focus schools had. So that's where we provided service for those schools.
About the CCRPI.
Oh,
The lists are different.
the lists are different. Very good. I'm glad you said that. In 2015, the calculations changed for the waiver, okay? And so to get on the CCRPI, they used the full total score for the CCRPI. To get into a priority or focus category, we use the academic portion because we believe that is the most important thing. If you're working on those things, your score is going to come up. So the lists were different, and that's why you had some that fell into priority, some that fell into focus, and some that were opportunity only. Okay. Supports. What do we do to support schools? Well, we give them funding. Our priority and focus schools, they get anywhere from $63,000 to $83,000. The majority of them use that to put in an instructional academic coach to help them in an area of need. They may also use it for professional learning, technology, other things, but the majority do want that person in the building helping them with that particular gap. Technical assistance. We provide school improvement specialists in our schools. We also now have district effectiveness specialists. Now, I'll tell you, a couple of years ago when I came to the department, we served from state to school. We went directly from the state to the schoolhouse. We didn't work with the district. We found out that was a problem because you could be doing really, really well in that school. But if your district had barriers, if things were going on in the district level that was impeding the progress of that school, the school couldn't remain doing well for very long. So now we have a district effectiveness specialist team that go in and they work with the districts and they align the work from that school to the district. I think one of the most powerful things that we do is for all the professional learning, the principal for that priority or that focus school, they have that principal supervisor from the district office come and listen to everything so that everybody knows what's going on, so that everybody has a common language of the work that is happening. I think that's very, very powerful for us that we are aligned. Communication. Well, we do communication from the state, from the region. We are set up to be in regions, and that helps us to communicate out what's happening, not just state level, but what's happening from district to district within that region. Because, you know, if you're in one school system right here, you may want to go and get some help from a system that's here or here in your region. You need that. So we have those kind of communications set up. And then professional learning. I think this is the most important thing that we do. We have professional learning that is at the state level. We have it at the regional level, the district, the school, and we have virtual. And what we're really working on in professional learning, the big pieces, we're working on putting in structures into a school, processes and structures. As you all know, if you're not organized, it's hard to be effective. So schools need structures and processes to be effective. They also need collaborative planning. They also need to work on professional learning communities where they're coming together and they're talking about what's going on in their school. Because, you know, we used to be very top down. We used to say, oh, you have to do this, you have to do this. But the thing is, the schools are the ones that need to decide their needs. They need to look at the school improvement process. They need to look at their root causes of things that are happening, their gaps. Why aren't their children learning? Where are they having the issues? And the professional learning communities need to revolve around the needs of those schools and those districts. So what we're trying to do is go hand in hand with them as they work for their individual gaps in those schools and districts. So it's much more tailored now. And I would say the most important thing we're doing is working with leadership. You've got to have leadership in that school building. And I don't just mean leadership in the principal. You got to build that leadership team, those capacity of those teachers. Because if you don't have that, you cannot be effective. And if that principal leaves, then you have to start over. But if you build the capacity within the building with those teacher leaders, you can keep it going. Not only capacity there, but that alignment from the school to the district level, where those leaders are all in sync, where they're all going in the same direction. Very, very important. So we work very hard with professional learning. Now, this slide is a very, very simple slide. It just shows you that we vary the intensity of our service. Okay? If you are a focus school, which our RESA serves, you might get a day of service a week. Now, if you're a priority, you're going to get 2 days of service, because those schools need more intense help. If you are a SIG school, you're federally mandated. You're going to be in there 3 or 4 times a week. You've got someone coming in there, and that's very important. So we know that we have to vary the intensity of the service to these schools. We want to make sure that they get what they need, but they're all at different levels. Okay, let's talk a little bit about results. And this is a very high-level view of some of the results over the past couple of years. And I will say that our districts and our schools have worked hard to get them. We've worked hard with those districts and schools to get them too. So during the years of 2012 through 2015, on this slide, we had 36 out of 79 priority schools that met the criteria to exit the priority status. Okay? If you look over at this side, the focus schools, we had 119 out of 154 focus schools that met the criteria to exit focus status there. So we had some success there. We can do better. Now we have the most current data that we just got through the CCRPI down here at the bottom. Shows that of the 83 schools that were either priority opportunity, because remember they're both, priority opportunity or focus opportunity, they met the criteria for both lists, 23 exited the list. So I guess our takeaway is we've had at least a third exit the list, and with our success. Now we do have some additional data. I'm going to let Will share that because he worked on that last night.
Thank you. Just real briefly, we just took the list that came out yesterday. I'm sure everyone saw it from the governor's office, and they listed 153 schools that are now considered chronically failing on that list. And so we just quickly looked through the list, and it was interesting to note that 27 of those 153 schools are priority schools. Remember, we have 79 priority schools, but only 27 of those priority schools are on that chronically failing list. Again, that set of 153 schools that was put out yesterday, 41 of those are focus schools. So again, of that bucket of schools that have been labeled as chronically failing, 41 of those are focus. So it's just interesting to note, just a piece of data to note is that how many aren't on there. So as far as the priority schools are concerned, remember we have 79. That means 52 of our priority schools are not on that list that appeared yesterday. For focus schools, out of 163 focus schools we have across the state, 122 were not on that list that was published yesterday, since only 41 are categorized as focus. So we just wanted to bring that information really quick. We haven't had a chance to kind of cull through it and disaggregate it even more, but just briefly, a little information that might be helpful.
Okay. So I kind of talked about what we're currently doing to help schools, and I also mentioned that we're trying to get better. We're trying to do more in helping to support and work with our schools, and Will's going to talk about where we're moving now.
Thanks so much. A couple things to start with. One is that these schools don't want to be in this position. We haven't met a school that wants to be considered a priority school, a focus school, or be on the chronically failing list. And so and the communities themselves don't want this. So we're real cognizant of that, and so we're trying to really partner with them and come alongside them and make things simpler for them when we have our hands on them when we're working with them. So that's one thing that I want to kind of make sure you understand about the approach that we take, as we consider ourselves partners with them, and this is very serious and very important for these schools that get labels or get identified for needing support, and the communities want to help. And so one of the things I'm going to talk about in a minute is how can we help the communities help the school, because I think that's one of the key takeaways. I just want to say briefly, Avis and I got this on the way in, the top 10 issues. It's terrific, and we had a real fast scan of the last article, and it was interesting. I don't know if you've had a chance to look through it, but the last article is talking about, now that OSD didn't pass, now what? And there are three, basically, I would consider them recommendations at the very end of the article. And one of them is we must agree on the problem. And I think that's really important. We need to all come to agreement in Georgia on what it means to be struggling. Because if we identify you differently, the schools get confused, communities get confused, and what exactly is the problem. So I think that's really a great recommendation, and we'll talk about that in a second. The second recommendation they mentioned is that Georgia also must decide what interventions should look like. That's a powerful statement. And that's basically going to be the message that I'm going to say in just a minute. We've got to all come to agreement on what improvement looks like, on what to improve and how to improve it. And we don't have that agreement right now. So that's our biggest takeaway, and that's our major step forward. And I'll explain to you a little bit more in a minute. And then the last recommendation, it says there's work that needs to be done within the building, but also work needs to be done outside the building. And that's what I was referencing a minute ago. We need to partner with our communities. The schools need to partner with their communities and teach the community how to help the schools. They don't naturally know how to help. And schools, some of our struggling schools don't naturally know how to ask the communities to help. So that's one of the things we're going to talk about in just a minute. So I wanted to share really quickly, so you saw the data, we're doing a pretty good job. And we got room to grow. But the thing is, when we go through these waivers and when we've gone through NCLB, is we're taking note. We're learning from what we're doing and what works and what doesn't work. So what we did was a year or so ago, we took all of the schools that we serve, all the priority and all the focus schools, and we looked at how much progress they were making or not making. We took the top 10% and we took the bottom 10%. So we could kind of say, so in these top 10% of schools that we work with, why do these 10%, why are they getting better? Why are they improving? And then we looked at the bottom 10% that were stagnant or going down. And we asked the question, why is it these schools aren't improving? Why are they going the opposite direction? And we went in on the ground and we looked at these schools and actually saw what was going on the ground in these schools that was working or not working. And I bet you can even tell what my answer is going to be to you about what works and what doesn't work. And what's really interesting to me is what works is the inverse of what doesn't work. Makes sense. So we looked first at the schools that are at the bottom 10%. Why are they continuing to struggle? Why did they just flatline or get worse? I think basically three big reasons. One, the school building doesn't make sense. You walk in and it's incoherent. Nothing makes sense. Things don't fit together. The curriculum doesn't fit together. It's just almost kind of chaotic in a sense as far as procedures and that kind of thing goes. So it's incoherent. Another thing is that there's kind of a pervasive sense of we don't own this problem. There's not a collective sense of, hey, we're all in this. We believe we're a part of the solution. There isn't that kind of culture in those buildings. And kind of the last issue is the problems kind of persist because the staff is not getting better and better. They're not experiencing development They're not using each other to learn together, to understand what's going on with the kids, the students. So they're not sharpening their saw. So those are kind of the big, I would say, the big three reasons why schools don't improve, and that's probably pretty logical to you. So obviously, why do schools improve is pretty much the inverse. If you go into a good school, everything makes sense. You know where to go, you know what to do, everything makes sense. It's coherent, it's clear. Another thing is you can feel a culture and you can hear a culture where everyone in the building owns the building. Nobody says that's not my job or that's not my student. Everybody owns it. Another thing is, which I think is really, really important, and it's a difference I didn't mention with the schools that are declining, but in the schools that are doing well, what's supposed to happen, happens. And a school that's declining, people kind of know what's supposed to happen, but nobody's making sure it does happen. So that's kind of a big difference that I think is really important. And then the last thing I think you see in these schools is you have teams come together, professionals come together. They look at what's going on in their classrooms, they look at the data, and they help each other improve. And that's a real key. So if you think about it, all those big 3 or 4 things that I just mentioned, you know, what do they all point to? It's what Ava said a minute ago. They all point to leadership. Leadership, typically, for the most part, makes these things happen or not happen. And so that's obviously a big emphasis of ours, has been for the past couple years, and it will be going forward. So this is kind of a flavor of why schools kind of stagnate or go down, and why some schools get better. So we know this all is what research says anyway. Nothing we found on the ground is different than what research says or what the best school systems do in the world. So it wasn't a shock to us. It was a corroboration of what we kind of know already. So going forward, so we, well, since the waiver, the new waiver in 2015, so the past couple of years, we haven't been sitting around, like Diane said, and waiting. We've been learning from our schools. We've been making changes because it's important for the schools that we make those changes. These are students we're talking about. So we've been making changes, and we've done basically three big things that we are doing or currently doing. We're kind of resetting our direction as an agency. We are working on developing people, particularly internally, and we're kind of reorganizing. We're not reorganizing the agency. We're not reorganizing schools. We're reorganizing our division so we can get better. So just really briefly about that setting direction. We have a couple of points about this. What is really interesting, we established a state leadership planning team. So we have the chiefs and basically the leadership of all the divisions in the agency come together monthly, actually bi-monthly, twice a month, and they're talking about how can we break down silos in our work and how can we come together and work together on the benefit of the school. And so that's really, really exciting, and there's some amazing things happening with that. There's quite a few divisions at the agency, and the leadership is all invested in coming together and saying, hey, we can pull together, we can row together. And so that's a great thing to see. Another thing is we have decided, this may sound strange, but we've decided who our customer is. Before, you could ask anybody who the customer is, and it might be different people, but we've all said, basically at core, who are we really serving? We're really serving the leadership of the schools and the districts, because it's their responsibility to make sure these schools improve. So we've all kind of honed in on who our customer is, and I think that's really significant. Developing people, we really, again, have been doing that more internally. Our folks in the agency are going through balanced leadership, which is a research proven leadership framework. So all of our folks are going through that so they can be prepared when we start moving this out into schools. And they understand, most importantly, we're trying to get our folks to understand how a leader sees things. So that when we're working with them, we're not working with them from an agency perspective. We're working with them from their perspective, a leadership perspective. And that's all the difference in the world. So we're doing that kind of internal development. We're also working a lot on collaboration. Remember I said a minute ago, the schools that do well, they have teams who know how to work together. You can't just get together and work. It doesn't work that way. You have to learn how to work together. We're doing that ourselves to learn that same process across divisions and within divisions how do we work together, effectively collaborate? So we're getting that kind of development internally. And then reorganizing, again, we're not talking about schools and we're not talking about the agency. We have reorganized our division of school and district effectiveness. The idea being, can we get the most support closest to the classroom door? And so that's what we've really done and spent a lot of time just reworking our infrastructure. And that's been very important. And part of that has been what Avis talked about a minute ago, is establishing regions. We now have 6 regions in the state, and those are stable and firm. And so the people in the districts, the people in the schools get to know our folks, and they don't keep changing and revolving. Speaking of our folks, too, I want to mention we have 2 in the room. 2 of my program managers are over here, Dr. Sam Taylor and Dr. Philip Luck. They're both program managers or leaders in my division, our division, so just if you want to chat with them, they're right there. So one of the things, the bottom line for us as far as going forward, again, we're doing pretty well. We can do better. We're doing some things already to prepare and to get better. And we need to make a couple more adjustments that I think will kind of really help us get more aggressive, positive results. First, what we need to keep doing is we need to keep differentiating, customizing, varying our level of support. Every school is not the same. Every school has a different level of intensity of need. So we don't need to come in as a hammer to schools that don't need a hammer. Or if schools have intense needs, we don't want to just drop by once a month. So we're going to match the intensity of need of the school to the level of support we get. That's a good thing. We need to kind of think more strategically about that and be some more aggressive. And we're talking about that and planning for that. But in essence, we need to continue customizing the level of support we get. But the big difference that we need to do, and I've mentioned it really before, this is sounds like a simple change, but it's profound. Currently, we don't agree, like I said earlier, on how to improve, what we need to improve or how. We don't agree on the approach to improvement. As a state, anybody supporting schools, if you ask them, they have different views on what needs improvement and how it needs to be, how it needs to improve. And this is what we've got to get right as an agency, and we're already working on this. So here's the graphic that we kind of use that maybe is helpful. If you look at this, imagine you're the school, you're in the leadership at the school. This is kind of historically how we've done this. You're a principal, you're a leadership team at this school. So how do you see, I know it's probably hard to see from there, but how do you see what's coming at you? Historically, we've had groups, divisions, agencies, all different people, well-intentioned, very talented people who are coming to the school and saying, hey, let's assess your needs. Let's figure out what needs you have. And let's come up with a plan. And here's the process we're going to help use with you to improve. And here's the guidance we're going to give. So if you do that over and over and over and over and over and over again, if you're a school leader or school leadership team and people are coming to help you and support you because you have that need, what you're seeing, what's coming at you is a lot of different things. A lot of very talented people who want to help and are engaged, but it's very confusing. This is one of our biggest problems. It's not that we have a lack of talent or a lack of will or anything like that. Everybody's doing really good work, but we need to make just a simple adjustment, and we need to make it look more like this. So imagine now you're a leadership at this school, and instead of everybody telling you, hey, figure out what needs you have, you got one assessment that you go through to figure out what are my needs. Instead of having multiple plans that are other people's plans for you, you have one school improvement plan. And everybody who's supporting you is supporting you in that plan. And what if you only had to interface with basically a group of people, like, for instance, our division, who is working with you on figuring out what your needs are and how you can improve? And what if all the other supports that were available were contributing to a big toolbox that we all agreed on? So when we figured out through the needs assessments and we made plans to improve and we highlighted things that needed to be done, we could pull from the same toolbox. So the tools look similar to schools. So it sounds really simple, but this is the thing that we are really working hard on now to get to. And I think it's going to make have a powerful effect. So if you want to look at this really just quickly, this is our new the approach we're taking, and this has been agreed upon across our divisions. So we, in our agency, we have decided this is what we're going to improve, and that's in the middle. We're all deciding what needs to be improved, and we've all agreed that this is on the outside how we're going to improve. So if you look at it, just look at it really quickly. I think it's helpful to see. The very center of it is the most important thing. And if you want to know what struggling schools struggle with most, it's that bullseye. Things are not coherent. The instructional system doesn't make sense. What they teach in one grade may not be followed up correctly in the next grade, or what's taught in one class doesn't mix with the other class, or the level of difficulty varies. And there's not a coherent instructional system. The teachers don't agree, this is how we're going to teach our kids. And so that's the biggest thing we're going to, that we all agree needs to be worked on. That's the biggest what. And then 4 others that support that. You need effective leadership. We all need to approach that the same way. What does that mean? You need to build professional capacity. You need to be able to get good talent, develop good talent, and keep it. So buildings need a process or a system for that. There needs to be learning centered. Mr. Woods talks about this often. Our classrooms and schools need to be learner centric, not adults. And what are the students' needs? And we need to base everything around that, not only academically, but psychologically, socially. All things need to be focused in on what are the individual needs of our students. And finally, I mentioned it earlier, we need families and communities that are involved. That doesn't just happen by in some places it does actually happen, but it typically doesn't happen just by chance. Parents and communities want to be involved, but we often don't teach them, in a sense, how to be involved. We don't teach the schools how to teach the communities to be involved. And so this is a big piece of what we think, if we can all agree this is a piece that we need to work on and how we work on it, that we'll see great results going forward. I'm just going to end with this one last, oh, by the way, both of these are very research-based. These are not something we pulled out of a hat. These are things that have shown results in different places over time. Last thing I want to say is that you probably heard this quote. That's one of my favorite quotes. I think it's from Deming. People think it's from some other person. But every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. It's a great quote. The way you design your system, you get the results that match that design. So if you need to change the results, you need to change the design. So we think that that's our job, is to come in, work alongside leadership, help them redesign their systems so that they start getting the results that the kids deserve. And so that's what we see our role as being.
Questions?
As you talk about customizing things for schools and consistency, et cetera, how do you budget for that? Because it's hard to know what a school might need, right? So.
That is a very good question. We receive funding, and that is pretty, I guess, stable funding that goes. Schools that receive like the SIG grants, they get additional funding to put in their reform models.
But those are federal.
But those are federal funds, and so some of it has to come at the school level.
Yeah, and so what we do now is we block grant funds, and based on what the school improvement plan says that they need. But one of the things we're considering going forward is to consider moving that maybe a little more to the district so that they can help the schools, and they can maybe parlay some of the resources so they're not having to spend everything just per school. And also we're considering heavily introducing some more competitive requests. So it depends on what you're trying to do in the school and what systems you're trying to fix in the school. You might have a higher cost at one school, and another you might not have that. So we want to get a little bit better at that. Instead of just block granting everybody gets this, we want to do some of that so everybody's got a certain basic amount of support. But then we also want to say, well, let's look at your individual school and what we've identified as needs, and how we're going to meet those needs may cost differently.
And that's part of the ESSA process that we're going through now.
Good question.
Last year, Michael Petrilli from Fordham spoke, and he made a really, I thought, profound quote that I want to run by you two since you're in the field. He said you can't fix a school if the system's dysfunctional. So you can go in and put a lot of resources into a school, and once you walk out, if the system is not working there, the district, it's all for naught. The school will go back to failing. Is that your experience, and how do you address that?
Well, I think that's why we're working with the districts now, that we did the state to the school, and we could get the school in a good place. But if that district, if there wasn't alignment, if the district wasn't accountable for that school, if we weren't all working together, it was hard for that school to stay doing well. So I think our answer to that is working with the district and really having that strong district effectiveness relationship with them and the school, that we're all accountable, that it's not just us going in, they're going in, and we're working together.
I think there are examples of schools that beat that trend, but I think they're very few. I think if you don't have, we know, if you don't have support or if you have barriers from the district, it makes it just that more difficult. So if you're a struggling school, you're struggling. And so to have a barrier, it's even more of a barrier, if that makes any sense. And we are working with the district now. We even not only went from the state to the school, sometimes we went from the state to the classroom. So we all sometimes bypass the school leadership and the district leadership. So now we're getting those together. I think the key is what Ava said, is when we're doing any kind of professional learning, when we're doing communication, when we're doing these problem solving at the schools, we bring in both parties, the district leadership and the school leadership, and we agree together, hey, this is what's broken, and we agree this is how we're going to fix it, and we'll come back in a few months. Well, we come back weekly, but we're going to come back officially in a few months and check and see how you're doing.
And we build capacity, because if your leadership changes in any way, if you put the structure and the processes in, you've got that going on.
Right.
And do you have the ability to force the districts to, I mean, for example, look at Dooley County, which, I mean, as far away as we are, I don't really know what happened in Dooley County. Well, let's assume the governor is right and it was not, it was, a dysfunctional mess. What is your power to sort of make a district where the center of power may in fact be ineffective, lazy, corrupt, whatever? How do you compel them to work with you in a way that will help the school at the classroom level?
I don't know if I can give you a full answer about the power part, but I think the most important thing is to, again, go back to the very beginning. I don't think schools and districts intend to be this way. And so our most powerful tool, I'm not going to talk about the policy or anything like that, but our most powerful tool is to show them why certain things work, and we actually point them to. So near the district you're talking about is another district that was in their boat not too long ago and is now knocking it out of the park. And they didn't just throw a silver bullet at it. They didn't just throw a lot of stuff and see what sticks. They were very strategic. We partnered with them, and it's incredible what they're doing. So we take districts like that and we say, look, it's not magic. It's hard work, but it's not magic. And here's what you can do. And I think them seeing, oh wow, we're in the spot that they were in, and now we're seeing them rise. We can do that too.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and move into the next portion of the program because we want to be sure and have plenty of time to hear from your leader, Superintendent Woods. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Again, I hope Avis and Will be around for a few minutes because I think I did see one more hand up. So at this point, I'm not going to spend a lot of detail on introducing Superintendent Richard Woods, who has certainly been doing a great job of leading the Department of Education over the last couple of years. Has been visiting schools, talking to students, working on a lot of issues, as you've already heard. So Superintendent Woods.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you today. Again, I think this is my third visit here, so very excited about that. And I think, as I look forward to, and thinking about the days ahead and where we've been and where we've gone, we've traveled a long way in just a relatively short period of time. I'm excited about public education. I'm excited about where we're going. We're seeing some great trend lines. We're seeing some great advancements throughout the state. It's not, I think a belief that's, based on, I guess, mythology or, the unseen, but it is something that, my optimism is based on what I've seen throughout the state. the transition that I've seen within the department over the past couple of years and where we have laid out and where we want to go. As we look ahead, where are we going? I think, what we find out, we talk about coherency. I think that as you just heard is, within us, that is our strategic plan, the strategic plan that we have, crafted. And it was a plan that was crafted together. This was not done in isolation within the department from a top down, but it was something we did collaboratively. Having that buy-in, something that was very important to me, bringing that type of leadership, style, because that is what I feel that we needed, not only within our department, but also throughout the state. And again, with that, I think Mr. Cardoza has some booklets. I won't go in too much with that because it's all contained within here. But some of it is just a rehash of what I've shared with you the past couple of years. But one of the things you'll look at is that even with the strategic plan, one of the things I, have thought about and looked at that we will be adding, to that, and again, you'll see a model of that, but it will be something that I thought was, glaringly omitted, was that on leadership. And I think for us within our department, leadership is extremely critical. And we cannot expect those throughout the state, to perhaps follow or to model what we are not prepared to do ourselves. And that's where, I think for even myself, looking at leadership, that I know leadership has a cap. And it begins with me as state school, superintendent. And that is where something we are looking at, trying to focus on that so that we can achieve, what is right for our kids and what is best for our kids. At the end of the day, we want our kids to be ready for life. That, is essential. We want them to have that ability to continue to learn. We want them to be able to be, productive citizens, having a great job, being able to function within society, but also be ready to take on leadership roles, which each and every adult at some point in their life will have that ability and opportunity to take on, a leadership role in some form or capacity. And I think that, as we talked about the optimism as well, there are great things going on throughout the state. And this is I think just a wonderful, vision and picture of the people and the men and women that are working within our schools to make great things happen. One of the things I can say is that I don't care what school I go into, I can find at least one great thing going on. And that's because of the efforts that are out there with our men and women, whether they're administrators, teachers working in our cafeterias, driving our buses, our paraprofessionals, our admin assistants. It is something in there that, makes, something really spark within a school. And I think about, what we are seeing, our graduation rate, continuously be on the rise. Within our 2020 vision, by 2020, I expect us to be, perhaps for the first time, as a state to be at the national level. We are making those moves and strides ahead. We're seeing increasing ranks and scores and ranking the SAT and ACT scores. Again, one of the things we have looked at that people have kind of compared us, but we are seeing growth. But we are seeing growth within our minority and subgroups, again, which is almost unheralded throughout the state or even the nation, where we are seeing perhaps a decline in some of these test scores. We are seeing an increase in the Georgia, and again, a wonderful trend that we are seeing. Roughly 1,000 schools waiting to be certified as STEM certified schools in the state of Georgia. And this is a collaborative work, and it's exciting to see young people who are now, working together. But what they are doing is that they are collaborating with the University of Georgia, University of Tennessee, with Georgia Tech, but not only with schools within our state, but we are talking and having conversations with people around the world. And this is kindergarten and first grade students. This is where the magic is really taking place, that we are looking at providing our kids with information. This is one of the strengths of technology. We used to have pen pals, but now we can have online and Google Talks, in instant and real time. And that's one of the things we're looking at, trying to provide our schools with those abilities and build on with that. Looking at that our students now are leaving and graduating with college credit due to move on when ready. And we were seeing some great moves with that. We're continuing to work with our partners with USG and TSG to expand opportunities in that role. Looking at articulation, looking at, working with business. Again, even having a conversation just the other day with the automotive industry of looking at having our young people be industry certified so that they can have meaningful, internships, not traditionally necessarily just work-based learning, but actually have true internships. And again, with the doors that have been opened up, last year especially, working with the General Assembly to make that happen. Students and educators throughout the state, if you look at that, we are having a lot of great recognitions. Individuals are receiving recognitions, in schools and students and teachers and educators throughout the state for the great work they're doing, not only within the state, but also on the national scene. People are looking at Georgia. Georgia has a great wealth of resource, not, just from an economic standpoint, but I believe from a people standpoint or a person standpoint as well. 364, we were able to lower, testing requirements. And, and I think recently with a board rule, for Move On When Ready, in which now students can go and they can complete, their coursework at the university system or TSG, but they don't have to come back to us and take a test. I think you think about, that was a common sense move. Why should a student have to go to a school, complete and have a passing grade, and come back and take a test for us? There's no greater sense of Move On When Ready and completion that you're college and career ready by passing and completing coursework at higher ed. And so those are some things that we have looked at. But as I've shared, we look at with this as some of the great things. What I do understand is that, we still have work to go. I think as Avis and Will spoke, this is something we realize. This work continues to go on. But it is a holistic work that we are looking at, trying to look at how do we support all of our schools. And again, thinking about, with Amendment 1, as I constantly shared with the staff and with other individuals that I met throughout the state, I said I knew there was one thing that was going to happen. There was going to be a vote. But at the end of the day, at the next day, what will take place as well is that we still had schools that underperformed. That did not change. And our challenge, again, going back to day one and taking this off, was to make sure that all schools succeed, all schools provide our kids with the optimal opportunity for success. And that was something, again, that started day one. This does not catch us by surprise. It was not something we were unprepared to do. I think that as what was shared with you, this is work that has been ongoing. And so I think that as we look at this, one of the things that I tried to look at, again, an individual who had been involved in public education for 22 years, 14 years as a classroom teacher, 8 years as administration. I knew what, Race to the Top and No Child Left Behind meant for the individual person that worked in the field. It was a day-to-day grind for us. And so I think that what we found out is that, this was a mindset that really was somewhat archaic. And I think we are seeing that, especially with ESSA and the changes up in Washington, D.C., they realized that there is some archaicness that was ingrained within the process. And I think this is where we had to move. We had to move as an agency from being compliance to coaching. We had to be, instead of being punitive to positive, instead of checking the box to solution-based, directive to customized, one size to personalized, compulsive to collaborative, reactive to proactive, and top-down to community-driven. Those are things that we had to change. And I think that those are steps that we had to realize that if we were to make long-lasting, changes, long-lasting improvement, we could not get lost in the process. One of the things we used to say, again, in my wing down in Irwin County, as we looked at education, that we always just saw the fads. And we would always say that, the more things change, the more they stay the same in education. Well, we've got to break that cycle. And unfortunately, I think that is one of the things we got locked up into. And especially with the federal level, and again, what was being pushed down was a cycle that we continuously chased, the end and never getting there. And that's something that, culturally we had to change. We had to make that adjustment. And I think those are some things we looked at. We are making a new approach and addressing a new approach with that. As we look at the new approach, engaging other state agencies, we cannot do this by ourselves. Okay, that is an impossibility. And that's just the reality of what we've got. We've got to have other people engaged in the process. And I think that as we look at this, trying to move, I think that hopefully someday we can say that we have a true statewide education plan. An education plan that breaks down the bureaucratic silos that government has arbitrarily set up. Again, it is silos that, again, I think that as you saw with the last couple of slides, what really is an appearance of what has existed throughout government, or perhaps at the district level within education. Individuals and again groups working beside, but in a silo that really does not build and support. You talked about money and funding, I think there. That is ways in which we better use the money and funding that is there to work together. Not to duplicate something. That's one of the things I think in education I've seen. We have been masters of duplication. We've run that Ditto Master till it can run no more, to be honest. Some of you may remember a Ditto Master. But those are things that we look at that we are trying to, to improve, to cut down, that sense of government, the inefficiency of government and bureaucracy. And I think that, looking at how do we look at this new approach, looking at, today we're looking at vocational rehab, providing resources, to fund, career coaches, working with our public library system during the summer, in which we're, I would have our reading and our feeding initiative, that bringing people together in a place that, really promotes a collaborativeness. Teaching reading, teaching literacy, trying to build together upon that. You would have thought that perhaps, government agency working together, especially public library and the state education department would have been a natural marriage. Well, that's something that, we did not have those conversations. And I think that as we look at, working with behavioral health, and Dr. Fitzgerald to increase physical activity in schools, it's good to have kids to go out and play. It's good to have that activity. That's research-based. And so those are things that we are trying to, work together. I think looking at, with the Department of Agriculture and our joint, farm to school initiative. Also with working with USDA and again within this group as well, we're looking at developing something called an academic nutritionalist. That now that the cafeteria and the lunchroom becomes part of our academic process, to build, and especially in the area of STEM education. Those are things that we're looking at. Creative, seeing school not as it is, but what can it become or what should it become? Working, I think, looking at working at ways to identify our schools. We have set, these schools that are being identified as priority, underperforming, we know who they are. But what we're looking at working with state agencies is make these communities your priority as well. Because if we strengthen those communities, we will strengthen our schools. And that is something we are having to do and we are having to look at. And we are working on that. And that'll be a process in which we move forward to make that happen and a possibility. We are making some great strides, even as we speak. Also, a foundational focus. K-5 education, I cannot tell you, is the most important thing that we do. If we do not allow our kids to have those basics in literacy and math in the K-5 area, we are setting up middle school, high school, and beyond for failure. And I think that is one of the things we have seen, especially working with Senator Tippins last year with 364. We are looking at trying to make sure our kids can read and be on grade level by third grade. That is important. I think the most important skill that we can transfer to any child is the ability to read, because that opens up the doors not only to education, but it opens up the doors to the world for each and every individual that's there. And so that is something that we are, working at. The governor has been very strong with that, and I appreciate his support in the K-5 initiative. And again, going with pre-K as well. And so those are things we are looking at, but also going back to looking at talking with agencies, talking with individuals such as our pediatricians. These individuals, as individuals come to have their annual visits or weekly visits or whatever they have within that, to have those pediatricians say, hey, Mom, Dad, have you thought about reading? Are you reading to your child today? Those are ways in which we are working across with agencies and groups that has never been heard of before. And I think going back to saying communication and relationship is extremely important. Coming on board, one of the things that really kind of caught me by surprise, as we began to build relationships, it was not unheard of to say that we have never met with the Department of Education. You would think that in some cases it would be natural, but that is where we have to be proactive to go out. We have to be missionary minded. We cannot assume that people will come to us, but we have to go to them. And I think that is one of the things that we find. We cannot be passive, on that end, but we must be aggressive. But also, I think, as mentioning this, our focus will also be on leadership. Leadership is a key component, if not the key component, to success throughout. We have to make sure that we are supporting our leaders throughout the state in a very formal, fashionable way, but one in which we allow them to succeed. We cannot set them up for failure. And I think that's working with them. Again, what you saw within our, the presentation with Avis and Will, leadership is one of the key buckets that's there. but that means that we are also working with higher ed. We are working with the chancellor and our university system because this is where a lot of the leadership comes. This is where that key component is. So it will not be done in isolation, but it will be something we look at and we build upon that to make sure that we have that. Community engagement, and I think that also one of the things we look at, and again, coming out of our, looking at not doing things in isolation, we have to have our communities involved. And I think that was one of the strong components, one of the strongest things that I think that I heard of, especially with ESSA. As we went out and we had these community meetings and we involved that time and time again. I can say, with absolute certainty at the end of every meeting, individuals came up to me and said, Superintendent Woods, I am so glad that we were invited to the process. Just the other day at the meeting, I had, expressing this idea, individuals wanting to come up and say, how can I get involved? The people and citizens of Georgia want their schools to succeed. They want to give opportunity for success to each and every child. And I think that is us opening that door and say, you are welcome to come, not to shut that door, in which in the past it has been, a way in which we have had, a set up barriers to that. But now working to how do we increase that? And I think that one of the things in the near future, we will be having our Solution Summit. And we are bringing Georgia together to solve these problems that not only for school, just underperforming schools, but we want everyone on a top trajectory. We don't want to bring the top and the bottom down to the middle. We want everything on a, to a limitless skyward move. And that means that we're looking at how do we succeed in bringing, our communities together so that all of us can succeed. But we will be bringing together, of course, our education groups, business, profit, nonprofit, faith-based, community, municipal, municipalities. We will be bringing, moms and dads, together to make sure that we are creating, the system that is best for Georgia and allowing school systems and communities to create what is best for them. Also, we will be having community conversations, partnering with organizations to hold meetings in the areas of the most struggling schools. Recognizing success, but also having very candid conversations. We're not going to whitewash anything. We're going to have, where we are doing things right, we're going to build and celebrate that. But where we need to move, we're going to make sure that we have that movement as well. Also, looking at the Department of Education, we had to make sure that we were ready to move. And that has been a 2-year process. Again, breaking down barriers in which we collaborate, talk, and move forward. We are creating, really a new concept, a new mindset. That instead of being a compliant and regulatory agency, we are now a service organization. We are here to serve. We cannot come in and mandate and dictate for the unknown that we don't know. And that's why I do believe in local control, because local control knows their community the best. I can look and I can point to, cities throughout the state of Georgia. I can, point to school districts or schools throughout the state. But I don't know what that is like up here in Atlanta. And that's why I think that is why it is so important that we create a system that, provides service. How can we help you? That is, again, one of the things I've, shared with my staff, that at the end of the day, when you leave a school and when you're in a school, or a district, your words should be, how should we serve? I think about Chick-fil-A, it's my pleasure. Well, for us in Georgia, what we should be known as, as the Department of Education is, how can we serve you? That is what people, that when they leave, that they know that we are here to help with that. And I think by creating a monitoring system, a new tiered, system of support, using a customized, personalized approach based on need and not punitive solutions. A common framework, for school improvement. And that means a common framework within the Department of Education. Again, we had to break down silos so that we and again, I don't even refer to us as divisions anymore, but we are teams. We are a system of an organization that works together. And I think one of the things we are looking at is having a common, budgetary planning session in which we don't look at what are the needs of the division, but we look at the needs of the agency. We look at the needs of the state. That is the way that we need to see things so that we can better use and utilize our resources and not say this is my money, but this is a collective part. I think about, it's kind of like my wife and I. We don't have her money and my money. It's our money, because if we go bankrupt, we're bankrupt together. All right? There is no separation there. And that's where I show that with schools together, that with schools, and with an agency, if we fail in one part, then we fail together. And that's something I think we have to look at and move. We're looking at an interagency collaboration, developing new tools for students, teachers, and parents. We have some wonderful things coming out. Our career pipeline, our counselor companion, just to mention a few, a new rewrite of our teacher resource links. Those are things in which they will be interconnected, in which not only one team within our agency can use, but everyone has access to. We're looking at sharing this, not only do we have access within the education communities at the local level, but we have that at the school level or at the home level as well. So as we look at this, this is not just a school improvement issue. This is a Department of Education issue. This is a Georgia issue. And that's why we have to work together. And looking, I think that as I kind of close on this, looking at increased flexibility. With ESSA and again the rewrite, we are seeing a lot of great opportunities for flexibility throughout the nation, but especially throughout the states. Our schools have, great flexibility. They have, contracts in which they have designed their own route to success. And that's where we should help, support them in those contracts. They are saying that we as a district, we as a school, believe this is the methodology in which we will succeed. And we shouldn't be coming in there to say that no, you're wrong, but we're here to support what you are doing. And I think contracts is the way in which I believe the accountability system of Georgia should move. It is something that I have a firm belief in. I think that it provides us the greatest ability to serve and reach out to those schools. Also looking at that, looking at our title programs. Having a consolidated program, we have actually now reorganized within the agency. We now have, title or federal programs. It's all under one bucket and not separated. And so using those title programs and with our pilot to allowing our school systems, again, going back to flexibility and funding, this will allow them to move money and use it in a way in which they have never seen before. I mean, it's kind of scary, as some have kind of shared with that, but it has wonderful opportunities. And I think that also there are some areas that the feds, have given us more flexibility, but now it's time to look at, state law. I think state law, are there barriers within the state that prohibit us from moving forward? And so, I'm excited as we look at this and move forward in the days ahead. I would, share some more with you with ESSA. ESSA, I think, as we look at that, will be ongoing. We do have, I think Matt will provide the website for that. A lot of, opportunities there. ESSA, again, looking at, it's not the perfect bill. It's not the best bill. I can tell you what ESSA looks like today, but we have a new administration coming in, and that may radically change. But I am hopeful that we will continue to see that they will say that, the states know best. And we're going to take that. We're going to take that lead, and that's where we're going to move. So that's kind of where we're at today. I'm excited about where we're going at in Georgia. I think we're on a great trajectory. We're going to get there. Again, as I shared with the staff, failure is not an option. It is not something that I can say that, is something we want to say that we're giving any child in the state of Georgia. And we're going to be there. We're going to see some great things, and we're going to continue to build on the success we have. And like I said, and I think next year we come back, you're going to have a really great report, with what you see, what's going on in the state of Georgia. So I'll open it up and entertain some questions. Ty?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about a recent UGA study that says Georgia's school grading system is tougher than those in other states. It's relevant in light of the governor's announcement today that he wants to double down on failing schools.
Well, I think in looking at the report, I would say that I would agree with a lot of the concepts there. I think if you look, again, from what I've read so far, take away the top performing NAEP states. I mean, they don't use a 100-point scale. They're not, I don't think most of those are not, the A to F. I mean, A to F, they either pass or fail. And we're looking at trying to improve. And I think we have to recognize, how we can do that within, especially within our elementary and middle schools. What you find out is that, everything is based just on achievement. But there's a lot of fluidity down there within that K-5 area, and even I would say the middle school, which I think we need to, put more emphasis on growth. Because you can have a lot of growth going on, but because of the mechanism, it may not recognize that. And remember, these are underperforming schools. These are not kids, these are not schools that are starting at the starting line. They are 50 to 100 yards behind. They face challenges. And so I think, we are looking at, are we improving? And, and I'm not against improvement. I think we have to be accountable. But I think it has to be fair. I think one of the things you look at as well, our measurement with CCRPI, it's pretty harsh. If you were to dump other states who use, an A to F, metric, maybe I think Louisiana and Florida, I think, which has been largely touted. When you compare our schools, I mean, we really make them look pretty bad, to be honest. You know, if we were the schools there, I mean, we are demanding a lot of from our kids, and so I think we have to look at something that is fair. And I think I think going back to looking at state law, one of the things again coming throughout the state, and one of the things I heard early on was a concern with CCRPI. And I think recognizing that growth, because one of the things we have to make sure that we are givers of hope. And I think that with CCRPI, and I think for some of these underperforming schools, and because of the metric that is being used, we are not giving hope to them. And that is critical. If you are to succeed in life, you've got to have that hope. And that's where we've got to look at. And our business is to improve and not be punitive on that. You know, I appreciate the governor and his work. And again, you know, we've had conversations on, you know, and seeing our kids improve. And I, you know, like I said, I believe that Governor Deal wants our schools to improve. And it's my job to make sure that his wish becomes a reality. And that's what we're doing. And I think that's where we're going to move on. But I do believe that we've got to look at CCRPI.
How much of this can you do unilaterally, and how much do you need the legislature to do?
Well, I think within some things, of course, we'll have to look at specific state law. I mean, I think the 100-point scale is within state law, so that has to be looked at. Some of the metrics, you know, I'll have to look at policy, you know, to see what can be changed. You know, there definitely is a wide variety with that, and those are some things we'll move. But that means we're having discussions with legislators. I hope to have, you know, a continued, you know, dialogue with the governor as we look at that, because we all want our kids in schools to succeed.
Speaking of that, you've mentioned that school leadership is critical, especially for some of these struggling schools. Have you had conversations with the governor since now that he's made this kind of his priority about what that might look like in terms of legislation? Like, what would a focus on leadership sort of look like?
Not specifically with that. Again, you know, even as we're looking at crafting of this, for us, this is a lot of new stuff. It is a lot of new plan that we're looking at, and definitely I didn't want to, you know, come out and say this is a piecemeal. I think we had to have something that was really kind of more of a clear, you know, goal of this is where we as an agency are going. And because, I mean, I have to sell my case. I mean, there are other individuals that are out there that, you know, perhaps philosophically see things different. And so I think that's why this was important. But, you know, it will be something I hope to reach out and you know, we kind of share with that. But this is a solid plan. I think this is where, you know, we need to go and where we are going as an agency, you know, for us. And, you know, I look forward to working with the governor, the General Assembly to make this happen. And so, like I said, I'm very encouraged about where we are. I mean, I look at 364. 364 last year could have been easy, something that, you know, could have fallen by the wayside. But the governor and I, we did have a discussion. It was a very good discussion, and like I said, we always have very open and, you know, discussions abroad, and you know, so I'm, you know, encouraged by, you know, what I've seen in the past, and like I said, he wants our schools to succeed, and we're going to make that happen. Okay. Yes.
Understanding that this is a legislature issue, but in your does the new funding formula need to be enacted this legislative session?
Well, you know, it's an aggressive move. I think that looking at that, I would like to see, you know, the possibility of what can we explore there. You know, I think having a funding formula that is fully funded, but also addresses some of the needs. Again, I look at, you know, of course, QBE. I mean, it goes back to, well, I think 1985, and you know, the world has changed since then. So I think that, you know, we have to look at that. I mean, you know, there again, I kind of go to a personal budget. I mean, you know, I don't budget the same way I did in 1985 as I do today. And so, you know, I think those are things you have to continuously look at. You know, and so, you know, things such as perhaps, you know, transportation. Well, I mean, you have a blanket, you know, contract for transportation. Well, I can guarantee you, transportation looks completely different in rural Georgia than it does in the metro area. You know, I remember when diesel went up to $4 a gallon. I mean, that cost Irwin County $600,000. So, I mean, those are things that we have to take in consideration. But yeah, I would like to see that conversation, you know, progress. You know, we can't keep kicking the can, you know, down the road, but, you know, we're here to do a job, and I hope that's something, you know, I'm encouraged by some of the things I see, but it's an ongoing dialogue. Yes.
Earlier the speaker said that the funding formula is likely to shortchange low-income students. Any thoughts on that?
Well, there again, I haven't seen all the dynamics. For us as an agency, we have not run numbers. I think we have to have something, but I think we have to be very mindful of that. I mean, these are the lowest, of the low, and they need additional resources. And I think trying to look at that, is that becoming more of a block, schedule, format? I think, one of the things we have looked at with our Title I funding or our federal funding in general. I mean, that's what we hope to expand to give, more flexibility with resources. But I do think we have to be mindful that, we don't, cut ourselves short. One of the things I think that at least a concern is, how do we identify economically development or disadvantaged students? We don't want to, undercut us, from the federal level. And not just we don't want to play games with the kids to just say we're trying to balance a budget. I mean, we have to make sure that we're doing right. But in the end, I think about that. I think about the governor's, reform on criminal justice reform. I mean, that saves us long term. And I think, we invest, early on, or we pay for it later on. I mean, that's just the reality of life. And so if we can improve education at the forefront, building up our communities and supporting them, then that saves us as a state on down the road. I think it costs a little bit more initially, but in the long term, it makes sense. I mean, that's why you make those investments, in life. I mean, typically you're a little more on the front end, but you pay off. And hopefully that'll be, what we see. But we'll, until I see more, I think we'll just have to kind of take it, a day at a time. I mean, that, like I said, as I found out with the General Assembly, I mean, each day is an adventure, and you just take it one day at a time. Okay. Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about teacher pay? Are you working with the legislature to maybe get a 3% raise, funding for that to continue in the coming budget years?
Well, I think always we have to look at where we can increase teacher pay. I think we're trying to find what that is. I think right now, of course, I'm glad for the cuts. Well, not the cuts, but we're doing away with austerity, and I think that's helping with the furloughs. I think that was a prudent first step. We have to look long term, and I think that's one of the things, and one of the looking at, I think, at the education reform package is how do you attract and retain teachers? I think pay will be one of the things we have to look at and talk about. Some things we may want to look at on the front end for our new teachers is maybe making teaching a high demand area, such as the governor's done in some areas, in which you can take away some of those loans. And so that being a little bit creative on the front end would be a way in which we might could supplement that. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. It was pointed out earlier during the discussion that there appears to be a trend of teachers leaving the classroom. What is the DOE analysis of that, and what does the future hold?
Well, I think last year we had a little survey that came out, and we had roughly about 53,000 teachers, almost half our workforce, and we looked at what they said the concerns were. They did talk about looking at the abundance and emphasis on testing, looking at the number of observations that were there, cutting back some of the I guess busy work that was there. And so I think with 364 that was a step. Again, traveling throughout the state, many teachers, many individuals, whether it's administrator or teachers, they've been very appreciative of that. This is an ongoing conversation, what we need to have. And I think that's listening to our teachers, creating an environment. Many would probably say that, give me a nice, safe, learning environment. That is what's important to me. One of the things we're looking at is providing, I think with our teacher resource link, giving them the ability to really close the door and teach. Not to have to recreate the wheel, but giving, them a mechanism of support, that we have. I think looking at, we talked about with our, underperforming schools, what you will probably find out is you probably have a good churn of educators there. Looking at talking with higher ed to say that you have now maybe a year-long residency, perhaps such as what a medical doctor, experiences. That way you get a good idea of what education's really like on the front end. But that way, what we do have, and just like a medical doctor, we give them a strong mentor to allow them to navigate and to move together. So, we're trying to do some things on the proactive. We're looking, I think, we mentioned about the pay. I mean, those are things. So, it's a comprehensive plan. And those are things we're seeing, but we're at least encouraged. I think at least some of the, the anxiety has been removed. It's not completely there. Again, I think this year, what I would say is my first time in visiting schools throughout the state, again, what I hear is the word hope and happiness. And I'm glad that I'm able to go back and teach. Okay, so if you get that mentality and we begin to build on that, hopefully that will snowball and we'll have a more positive effect. Okay? All right, well, I'll appreciate the work, and if we again, as I begin the conversation, if we could be of service to you, we are here to serve. So again, thank you very much. Okay, appreciate that.
I think continually seeing the partnership's 25th anniversary logo has me in somewhat of a reflection mode today, but I was thinking about the evolution of the Department of Education over the last 25 years that I've been involved with them. And what I hear today is that there is a lot of clarity about what you guys are focusing on, certainly focusing on connecting with stakeholders in education, with that collaboration, and celebrating successes. And we have seen some successes, as was pointed out. So many thanks to Avis and Will and Superintendent Woods for all that you do.